coach, I'm gauging training blocks based on where my athlete is and how much fatigue is in their body. That helps me determine when they're going to peak. It helps me determine when they need to rest. And I might make an adjustment to somebody's training plan within a week's time frame based on the stress that's present in their body. So that's huge to me. We're no longer approximating using heart rate. We're actually using real metrics.
Heather, didn't they mentioned in that pro panel that they found that the breakdown wasn't as significant too, right? So reflecting what you're saying with the TSS being lower, using actual power, find that you can actually push
in some cases.
further.
In some cases where you can. So it's interesting. So Wes and I had a discussion the other day about coaches that are really data heavy and coaches that are more qualitative on allowing an athlete to go into a workout based on how they're feeling. And I think the best is a blend of everything, of using science and using perceived exertion. And so in no way is power on a bike or power in running trying to ever replace how an athlete feels. But to be able to have that metric and combine it with an athlete how an athlete feels, that's so valuable. Using heart rate alone, I can use myself as an example, and this is sort of funny. So when it comes to stuff like giving a presentation like this, I'm a known procrastinator. It's how I perform well in making a PowerPoint in one day and just like showing up and doing it. But I basically drank coffee all morning and just like sat at my computer doing this presentation. But I had a run on my schedule today, and I'm on a recovery week right now, so I was supposed to keep my heart rate pretty low and just take things easy. And I ran outside, and it was whatever, like 28 degrees. And so just like, I didn't want to feel cold. I hate to feel cold. And so I just ran at what felt good to me. And I never looked at my garment. And like the last 3 minutes of the run, I looked down and my heart rate was 176. And this is supposed to be a recovery week. And so as I'm typing my notes in my training peaks, I'm like, sorry, coach, I blew this up. But as it turns out, so me not drinking water today, just sitting around drinking coffee, I was dehydrated. And so that showed in heart rate, but my perceived exertion was not equivalent to 176. And then looking at my power when I got home and uploaded, my power was where it should be. And so that's an example of an exterior stress of me being dehydrated showing up in my run. But I don't think that I overly stress my body. So just an example of how we do that. So with being able to combine an athlete's perceived exertion, real metrics like power, and then heart rate, we have 3 different areas that we're able to improve an athlete's performance. Running economy, so by using heart rate, we're measuring economy. So economy is our cardiovascular fitness, how much oxygen is required for us to exercise. We can improve economy by being able to run faster with less watts. So more watts is not better. We want to be able to run faster using less watts, using less power. The running economy is one of the measures that we get. One of the studies that Stryd did as part of their development was that if we can increase running economy by 8%, a sub-elite athlete can improve their 5K time by 30 seconds. And that's pretty huge. pretty bold statements in Jim Vance's book on, he predicts that we're going to see all kinds of records broken in running by having this technology, because it is going to change. It's not providing us with stronger running. It's providing us with more knowledge to change some of the ways that we train. So it's going to, in the beginning, when I mentioned that I feel like in the beginning, as we're starting to use this, that it's more about data collection and then making changes. So some of those changes are going to be to stride length, arm swing, vertical oscillation, leg spring stiffness, leg extension angle, muscle activation, and even shoes. It's good. I wear Hocus sometimes, and I wear Newtons sometimes, just depending on my run. And it was one of the first questions that I asked Adam at Stryd, as I've been talking to him, is, what about shoes? And we were on the phone, and he laughed, and he was like, actually, that's my next project. And that he's been hired by an outside party to test what if I run the same run on the same level of fitness, the same level of fatigue in different shoes. So we're going to see a lot of this. There's no telling where all that's going to go. The leg spring stiffness. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but it is really key. So the soleus muscle is, so the calf is two muscles. The soleus is the longer of the two that connects down at the Achilles tendon. So I did mention, as swimmers, we have really flexible ankles, and so we tend to be too loose. There are ways to strengthen and tighten. Eccentric loading exercises is one. I'll give an example of some of those in just a second. Strength training and plyometric exercises. Example of eccentric strength motion is if you do a glute ham raise where your legs are suspended and you're lowering down, coming back up, working the hamstrings and glutes. To have that negative motion be very slow. Or if we were doing a single leg squat with our legs suspended in the back, like a Bulgarian split squat, having the way down be very, very slow, and then maybe using a little bit more force on the way up. So there's lots of examples of eccentric loading of the muscle, but that's a way to really help develop the soleus muscle and gain more stability there. We can monitor improvements over time by seeing how, comparing if you are able to run the same distance, not faster necessarily, but with less power at the same speed. So one of the things in the pro panel that we heard, which is, I think it was actually Crowe, that it was a quote from him. He said, running fast is always not necessarily about our speed increasing, but about not slowing down. And I know Lionel Sanders, he broke the Ironman world record recently, but he didn't have a great performance in Kona. And his run in Kona, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was about 15 minutes slower than ideally he could have run. And he ran with a Stryd power meter, and I can't remember the other athlete's name right now, but there is, if you want to refer to this, there is a Training Peaks article with both of the athletes' data, and you see definitively where Lionel Sanders' form breaks down. And so that was his movement threshold, the point in time that he was no longer able to hold his form. And so if we're able to study that and make improvements, then that's how we can really, for Ironman distance, this can be very, very valuable. Speed per watt. So I don't think think I mentioned, so Jim Vance, he is well known in the USA Triathlon community, but he has written the first book for running with power, and speed per watt is his favorite measure that he talks about. And it is basically about not slowing down, creating that durability so that we can run at a faster pace at a certain number of watts, or run at the same pace but using less watts. Both of those situations allow us to be stronger athletes. So ways that we can boost our performance by running with power. We can train with more specificity. So right now, like if I had my goal race for myself or for an athlete, I look at power profiles for cycling because they're readily available. Right now, we haven't collected enough data to have the same files available for running, but it will happen. As we collect data, you will be able to look at a power profile for Ironman Texas versus Ironman Canada that's very hilly. And I would be able to train that athlete for that specific requirement of that race. For instance, with TSS, we train to TSS. So like an elite level pro male athlete typically has about 280 to 300 TSS points for an Ironman bike. We're going to be able to now look at what those numbers are for running for different courses as we collect more and more data. We're going to be able to improve your running technique. That might be improving something that needs to, whether good or bad, we may be able to make changes that might be in arm swing, like I've talked about, leg length, stride. It's all going to be a big experiment, I think, for a while. One of the things that we've known about cycling is that watts don't lie. Power numbers do not lie. So a good example for me with running would be if you were running a given course on any day, but then the wind is different. So if you have a headwind or if you have a tailwind, but if your coach has said, I want you to stick to a certain pace, or I want you to stick to a certain heart rate range, well, what if you had a tailwind and your coach had said for you to stick to a certain pace, but you were able to look at your power and know that you could possibly pick it up a little bit. So those are variabilities that we now have with power that we didn't previously have. You're able to predict fitness plateaus better because of a power performance management chart. Again, back to more metrics based on TSS, based on fatigue, and more accurately predict fitness in an athlete. I thought this was fascinating. With monitoring injuries, we come to people like Tom when we're injured, and it's a step-by-step approach of healing to get back to where we want our fitness to be. But what if we were also able to use a tool like a power meter for running to say, you know what, the injury is not as bad as we thought because your power numbers are coming back sooner. To me, that's fascinating to be able to say, you know what, my injury is not as bad as I thought it was. Because that's something that pain may not reflect. Say your symptoms are gone, but we're able to look at metrics and say, you know what, you're coming back sooner, or you're not coming back as fast. And so that's super important. Know truly how hard you're training. Again, a combination of perceived exertion, heart rate, and now power to put all those things together and have the most accurate knowledge of how hard you're training. Better recovery. With with better recovery, it's, again, back to that knowledge, back to those metrics of having TSS, training stress balance, or TSB, that you see on Training Peaks, not just for bike, and then not an approximation for running, but now be truly accurate for running. So that you see, if I'm training at a certain training stress, do I need to recover sooner, or can we push that building cycle a little bit longer before the athlete needs to recover? Precision tapering. Every athlete is different, so not all athletes' tapering should be the same. An older athlete might need a longer taper, more time to recover before they're ready to peak. But the more we know and the more metrics we're able to put into that, the more specified we're able to make those metrics too with a taper. And then also the same exact thing we put into a warm-up. So instead of a warm-up before a race or a key workout being sort of vague, if we knew that the race was going to be a certain demand on the energy system based on power metrics, then we were able to warm up to that and make it a warm-up much more specific to the intensity of the race. Power to weight ratio. So power to weight, somebody like Pat, who races bikes, that power to weight is like, they're crunching numbers all the time. Like, hey, what's your power to weight? And now what we're going to be talking about in running. And if you know that you could either, if you need to gain weight, gain muscle, and change your power to weight, but then also if you knew that losing 3 pounds was going to change your power to weight ratio for running, and you would be able to put that number into real time of what that improvement would then be to your performance. Pacing. I've already talked about this one, but pacing to win. So, and then these last two go together. Know when to open the throttle and pacing to win. So instead of just going by how you feel during